The spring season of anime is finally over, and we're already done with a whole quarter of summer, which means that I'm more than 4 weeks late for this video. But hey, at least I'm finally here, unlike the second season of No Game No Life. So, join me as I go through every single anime I dropped and completed in spring 2024. The anime season that started off with me watching the most shows I have in recent years and ended with me dropping more than half of them, along with a few of them having a crazy fall off. I'm gonna be going through my thoughts and rating the shows I completed like Demon Slayer, Windbreaker, Kaiju number 8 and a lot more. Then moving on to anime that I ended up dropping like Unnamed Memory and Ranger Rechecked. And the latter is a show which I myself hyped up, so it hurts even more. And without wasting any more time, let's just get started with by far the most popular anime this season, and of course I'm talking about Demon Slayer. The Hashira training arc of Demon Slayer is by far the most hated season of the anime. I saw countless people calling this a filler season and wanting to skip it. And honestly, I can't even blame them because Ufotable stretched 8 chapters of the manga into 8 whole episodes, with 2 of them being double length. So, I completely understand why a lot of people hate it, aside from the incredible final episode. But personally, this was my second favorite season of Demon Slayer so far. And yes, that means I liked it way more than the Swordsmith Village arc and even more than season 1. And the main reason for that is me preferring enjoyable anime original content over dragged out fights over the span of multiple episodes. I genuinely enjoyed almost every single episode of this season and grew more attached to characters I didn't care about previously. I still kinda believe that the whole season was 2 episodes too long, but honestly, the incredible final episode kind of makes me wanna cut it some slack. Solid A tier. And next up is Konosuba Season 3. Konosuba is finally back after almost 5 years since the movie, and it's just as great if not better than before. This was potentially the best season of Konosuba so far. I don't know if I like it better than the movie, but it's honestly pretty darn close. This was my weekly dose of dumb fun and it made me laugh every single week. The episode with Dust and Darkness was by far the funniest episode of Konosuba, and honestly one of the funniest anime episodes I've ever had the pleasure of watching. The characters are just as great as the previous seasons, and we even had some shockingly decent drama and the second best Hydra fight of the season. S tier for Konosuba greatness. And next up we have Dungeon Meshi. It's technically a winter season anime, but it did finish airing in spring, so that's why I'm putting it here. Dungeon Meshi was one of the most hyped up winter anime, a fairly popular manga, getting an anime adaptation by Studio Trigger, the studio that's famous for mostly sticking to anime originals. But all this hype only made me more skeptical about the premise of the show and wondering just how are they gonna make an entire anime about literally cooking monsters in a dungeon. And at first, it seemed like I was right to be skeptical about it. I really wasn't a fan of the first 6 or so episodes. But after watching all 24 episodes of the anime, I finally realized something. And it's the fact that Ryoko Kui, the author of Dungeon Meshi, is an absolute genius. Dungeon Meshi is a story that has an insane amount of thought put behind it, and I am genuinely amazed by the author's insane imagination. Dungeon Meshi has some of the best and most creative world building I have seen in a fantasy anime, period. What starts as a gimmicky story quickly turns into a fantasy masterclass with turning points that leave you speechless, and the characters are all incredible as well. I don't wanna spoil you guys, but it's a very unique story that's definitely worth watching and continuing if you dropped it early on. I wanna give this an S tier, but I really wasn't a fan of the first few episodes and the humor just wasn't landing for me either. And that's why solid A tier for me and an S tier recommendation if you guys haven't watched it already. Kaiju number 8. The new and shiny shonen anime that people hyped up as the next big thing. It was one of the more popular anime of spring and I have absolutely no strong feelings about it. It very much felt like I was watching Attack on Titan if it was a 7 out of 10 show. I definitely don't hate it, but it's like the definition of mid for me. I did not care about most characters aside from Hoshina and Kikoru, and the series doesn't do enough unique things to stand out from other shonen anime. It's perfectly fine for a show to not be unique, but Kaiju number 8 just feels really uninspired. Solid B tier. It's the kind of show you like more or less depending on how many other shonen anime you've seen. Windbreaker. This was one of my favorite new anime from this season. It's a delinquent anime by Studio Cloverworks. It's an action anime first and foremost, and the action looks great. There are definitely some rough looking moments, but the animation is amazing for the most part. I really liked all the characters as well, aside from these two MFs at least. Like, they were genuinely annoying as hell. The plot is as simple as it gets. It's a bunch of teenage kids healing decade-long traumas by beating the shit out of each other, and call it cheesy or whatever, but honestly, I loved it. The fights were all great and the music was also another standout for me. I would give this an S tier, but sadly the fight that I was looking forward to the most ended up as the most disappointing. And the last 4 episodes were spent setting up the next season. Solid A tier. Next up is Mushoku Tensei Season 2 Part 2. My review will be linked in the description if you wanna hear my full thoughts on it, but to keep it short, this was my favorite season of Mushoku Tensei so far, and that is despite having some of my least favorite episodes of the entire series. It is an easy S tier for me, and it was my favorite spring 2024 anime. And last but not least, we finally have Jellyfish Can't Swim at Night. This was on track to become my favorite anime from this season and an all-time great. But of course, the series fell off in the second half. I can't stress enough just how much I loved the first 7 episodes. It really felt like I was watching something special. The direction was incredible and the characters were an absolute joy to watch on screen. And seeing their struggles and ultimately following their passion made me tear up almost every single episode. And then comes the second half with some melodrama that felt really forced, and it was just worse written than before. Like, who decided that it was a good idea to have the two leads not interact with each other for 5 freaking episodes in a 12 episode anime? The anime was still great, but it just had a lot of potential to be something really special. It really sucks, but I'm gonna have to put this in A tier as well. And now we move on to every anime I dropped in spring 2024, starting with Unnamed Memory and Ranger Reject, both of which I dropped for very similar reasons. Both had terrible anime adaptations which rushed through the source material and cut out a shit ton of content. Obviously, Unnamed Memory is far more rushed than Ranger Reject because it stems from a light novel, but I really hated the pacing of Ranger Reject after the 3rd episode. And it really didn't help that the show suddenly looked way worse. Unnamed Memory was pretty much doomed from the start because it was being adapted by Studio Engi, but the first 3 episodes of Ranger Reject were truly great, and it just got worse and worse until I had to drop it around episode 9. Definitely gonna check out the source material for both of these at some point. Next up we have Viral Hit and Hana no Ikon. Viral Hit was so ass, I physically couldn't watch it after the 2nd episode. It was just way too edgy for me, and the show had terrible animation for an action anime. Maybe it got better later on, but honestly I have no intention of ever continuing it. And Hana no Ikon actually wasn't that bad. I really enjoyed the first few episodes, but the MC just got creepier and creepier as the show continued. He was just way too possessive along with giving off weird vibes, and our protagonist being completely fine with him was pretty much the last straw for me. I don't like to rate shows I haven't completed, but based on what I've watched, both of these would be D tier. And finally we have Whisper Me a Love Song to end off the video, and this one really hurts because the production fell off of a cliff. The animation already wasn't great in the first few episodes, but it at least had some pretty decent and beautiful drawings. But it slowly got to a point where it started to look really awful. I heard that the show had a lot of production issues, so I feel really bad for the staff members, but I just could not continue watching it. I did enjoy the story and I'm willing to read the manga at some point as well. But yeah, those are all the shows I completed and ended up dropping in spring 2024. Here's the final tier list, so feel free to pause and look through it. Also, I forgot to mention, but there are a few shows that I've put on hold, such as Girls Band Cry and Train to the End of the World. I really wanted to complete them, but I just could not delay this video any longer. Feel free to recommend any shows from spring 2024 that I didn't talk about in this video, and I'll definitely check some of them out.